All right, everybody, welcome back into the Leaning into Leadership podcast. This is episode number 231, and my guest on the show today is Dr. Jen Schwanke. Now, if you don't know Jen, let me tell you this. She is a dynamic leader with nearly 3 decades of experience in education. She has served at every level, teacher, principal, district leader, and now she is the deputy superintendent in her district in Ohio. She is a 6-time ASCD author with her newest book, Trusted: Trust Pillars, Trust Killers, and The Secret to Successful Schools, having just been released. In our conversation, Jen and I dig into some pretty powerful truths. We talk about why schools often feel under attack, the role that trust plays in successful leadership, and what new principals need to focus on when they're handed the keys for the very first time. Jen brings wisdom, practicality, and relentless positivity, and I know you're going to walk away with strategies you can put into use right away. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump into my conversation with Dr. Jen Schwanke. All right, everybody, welcome back into the Leaning into Leadership podcast. I'm really excited about this particular conversation. Joining me is Dr. Jen Schwanke, and you've already heard a little bit before we jumped into the episode about kind of her background and stuff. So I want to kind of just dive right into this conversation. And where I want to go with this, well, first, let me say this. Jen, welcome into the Leaning into Leadership podcast.
Thank you. It is such an honor to be here talking with you, Darren. I think our paths have crossed kind of unintentionally before, so I'm glad that we're sitting here with our mics open talking to one another.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. Yeah. I mean, we've been connected for a long time. The first time we're actually having a conversation.
Exactly.
But I guess that's just the world that we live in now, right?
It is.
So
That's right.
So what I want to open with here, I was mentioned to you before I hit the record button. I was out getting my steps in a little bit ago, listening to you on another podcast, and you had shared the kind of the core of your dissertation and how there's kind of this correlation between times of unrest in our country and when people are really putting the spotlight on schools. So I just want to open with just saying that, and I'm going to let you kind of run from there.
Perfect. Yeah. This was the core of my dissertation work, and it was completely unintentional, and I had to do a little bit of tap dancing to get it done. But here's what happened. I was enrolled in my doctoral program, and I had a wonderful advisor. I got my degree through the Ohio State University, and I really wanted to study the principalship, and I wanted to study school leadership, and I'm currently in a deputy superintendent role, so I wanted to look at that. But I also wanted to dig into this question that had been nagging at me, which is, education feels like it's a mess. It feels like everybody's mad at us all the time. It feels like our society is not valuing education. And it feels very unique. It feels unique to this time and place. But then I started reading, and I found that is not true at all. So I went to my advisor and I said, hey, can I do a history research study? And he said, yes. And so it was a collaboration between the education department and the history department. Here's what I found, Darren. I found that a society reflects her unrest, her ills on its schools. And it happens because when the adults that are running things, the politicians, the legislators, the school leaders, the principals, the teachers, the parents, when they don't feel great about how things are going, they look to the next generation thinking, well, at least we have to work on the kids. We have to make sure the world is a better place for them. So let's criticize what the teachers are teaching. Let's go after the principals who aren't doing things the way we want them to. And a critical component here is everybody who's a grown-up walking the earth thinks they know about schools because they went to one. And school leaders know there's a lot of nuance, laws, mandates, regulations that most people don't know about. It's complicated, right? But everybody thinks they know. But if you look back in history, when schools began, and my study started in 1604, the idea was, let's create these schools so that our young white boys know a little bit about how to read and a little bit how to write. And then when we go forward, every century and every decade since, more things were placed on the plates of schools. And there's a chart in this new book I have coming out that shows every decade what was added to the plates of public schools. And it's visually, you can see, it's just massive. Every decade that passes, there's more and more and more. And with that comes more criticism. But if you look at these key points of really tough times in our country, you look at World War I, you look at the Great Depression, you look at World War II, you look at the Civil Rights Movement, you look at when the Supreme Court started to get involved in education. All of those times were times that were really, really tough for schools because nobody felt great about society and everybody looked to the schools to say, "In the heck are you doing?" And so to me, it was actually comforting to see those trends because I thought this isn't unique to now. This is a society that's unsure of its future. And so, of course, they're looking to schools. So as a leader, again, that's a comfort to me because I think we can navigate this. This isn't the first time that the schools have felt like they're under attack.
Well, and I think that was what really stood out to me when I heard you talk about that, like I said, on another podcast. And it made me, what's the best way to say this? I think it made my shoulders come down just a little bit.
Right.
As you know, obviously I'm not somebody who is leading a school right now, but certainly have done my time doing that work and support so many others who are doing that now. And yes, we do certainly feel this white hot spotlight on schools right now. And certainly right now, regardless your political leanings or anything like that, we know we're at a time when the federal government is trying to really reel in and cut a lot of spending and reduce funding to schools. Like a lot of schools are pretty much in panic mode right now with, wow, we can't cut all this money from our title programs. It gave me a little bit of relief, honestly, to say, okay, this is not the first time. So what are some things that school leaders right now should be doing to kind of lean into this and to maybe help carry that message forward to their staff so their staff doesn't feel so overwhelmed?
Right. I think there's several things we can do. The first is to see clearly what's going on and to understand that there's an attack on schools because there is uncertainty in political and financial and social environments. And seeing it clearly, I don't propose that everyone go out and give themselves a huge history lesson, although that is helpful. But in the past, when there was this white hot look at schools, the mistake leaders made was, first of all, ignore it. Second of all, defend, deny, or deflect blame. Or 3, do the woe is me. This is so hard, education's so hard, nobody respects us, that kind of thing. Because all 3 of those are just going to make everybody madder, right? So we have to be knowledgeable. We have to look at what's happening. So for example, right now, I believe the education environment there's a lot of mistrust of schools. There's a lot of feeling that there's some indoctrination going on, or teachers are not committed, they're not trustworthy for whatever reason. They're trying to teach things that they shouldn't teach, that kind of thing. Now, I want to be very, very clear. That isn't everyone. There are a lot of people who have excellent school systems and they're thrilled to send their children there. But what we can't do is just continue with what we're doing. So here's an example. Money is weird right now. Many states, their legislators are going after public schools. And whether we like it or not, budgets are going to change. And so I believe we need to say, are we as lean as we can be? Are we maximizing our staff? Because tied to that too, Darren, is if we're not, then within our staffs, the people that come to work in our district every day, there's some people who probably are working too hard and people who aren't working hard enough. And so we have to address that, because if you're looking from the outside, you're a taxpayer maybe who thinks the school is overspending. They might be right. And so we have to make sure we're lean. And we have to make sure that the product that we're turning out, whether it's a first grade reader or a junior in high school who's looking at the next steps in their lives, we just have to make sure that the product we're creating and delivering is in line with what our community needs.
One of the things that makes me think of is, and I'm gonna say a phrase in a couple minutes, and I don't want you to drop the mic and storm off when you hear me say this. And people, I don't want you to turn off the podcast and say, I'm never listening to Darren again when you hear me say this. But we dislike, as school leaders, hearing, well, that's the way we've always done it.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, what I'm hearing you say is, as school leaders, we need to get up on the balcony and maybe take a look at the way we've always done it. How can we do some things a little bit differently too? Not just asking others to do things differently, but we need to maybe look at attacking different
Right.
situations in different
Right.
ways. And maybe it's, okay, look, this is how much you get. We've always done this, right? With here's what you get in your budget. Okay, now let's figure out what we can do with it. This shouldn't maybe be different.
Well, and I think we should really land in that spot for just a minute because I agree. I think school leaders need to say, okay, what is it that we're hearing? Where's the grain of truth in the criticism and what can we do about it? One of the things that we as school leaders often say is, I hate when people say that's the way we've always done it, but then we do it the way we've always done it. And again, I want to be clear. I am not at all advocating for blowing up the traditional school model. I think it took 425 years to fine tune the model, which is small community elementary schools, middle schools where we really focus on the adolescent learners, high schoolers where there's pathways, where students have a place to go. That works. It's what our society wants. It's a social contract we've made. So I do not say let's blow up the model. What I say is, are we evolving to kids' needs? Are we in a place where students are learning about the technology that's out there? They're being taught to responsibly use it. Our grading practices are fair and make sense. We're communicating with parents about their kids' strengths, weaknesses, and growth areas. Those are the things that we can get better at doing. And I think there is a gigantic amount of stress on schools because our community has asked our schools to be responsible for things that in the past were the responsibility of home. A great example is attendance. In my state, for many years, it was the parents' responsibility to get the kids to school. Somehow that narrative changed and schools kind of took that on. Okay, we will try to get kids to school. And so now these poor principals are hearing, well, are your classrooms engaging? Are they fun? Do kids want to be there? Well, the answer is, I hope not. I hope it's not recess all day long. We can't take on responsibility of things that we can't control. So the things we can control, we need to do well. And I think it's a mistake to ask schools, teachers, principals to be a place that every kid wants to come, be part of. Sometimes kids don't wanna. And we still have to push them and make sure that they're ready for adulthood. So that was a long, meandering way to say, yes, I think we need to stand up on the balcony. We need to audit what we do. We need to have really hard conversations with ourselves and our staff. So here's an example. I helped a district do a staffing audit where they really needed to cut down on some teachers. And I went in, I looked at some data, I helped them think about some positions that could be reduced. And the commitment was never cut teachers. We were going to utilize teachers. So I gave them 3 or 4 things that I thought they could do and save about $500,000 a year. Well, they didn't do it. And I understand why. They didn't want to go to that teacher who had for 20 years been in the room in the back, I'm air quoting here, helping kids when they need it. But he wasn't moving the needle. He needed to be changed to a position where he had a caseload, where he had data, where there was accountability. But they didn't want to go to him and say that because they loved the guy. He's a member of the community. He runs the RCIA program at the church. They didn't want to have those hard conversations. And I said, okay, I'm fine. I'm getting on an airplane and leaving. But you're leaving $500,000 on the table. So my challenge there is have the hard conversations internally and then make the moves.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's, man, that one just keeps
Right.
staying stuck in the front of my head because having had to go through some of those exact same types of things where, have to make some tough decisions and you have to trim some positions and that type of thing, certainly having those hard conversations is really something that's extremely important for principals to be able to do and for superintendents to be able to do. And I think it's the perfect segue actually into talking about, and we've kind of been talking about, but let's really talk about your new book coming out this summer, Trusted, Trust Pillars, Trust Killers, and the Secret to Successful Schools. Let's really get into trust because that's ultimately that core element. Everything we've talked about up to this point in time, if we're not building a trusting environment, trust within our cabinet, trust within our community, trust within our teachers, and so forth, none of this happens. None of this is relevant. So let's lean in a little bit to that. Let's talk about building trust and have you share maybe some insights there's a whole lot of people who have just been given the keys for the first time.
Right.
As a building principal, elementary, middle, high, whatever it is, preschool director, I don't care what it is. They just handed you the keys and said, hey, good luck.
Right.
What are some steps that you recommend for people to begin that process of building trust with everybody that they need to build it with?
Right. Well, first, let me address the elephant in the room. Everybody thinks they know trust is important. Trust is, what does that word even mean? Well, it's a lot like love. It's hard to define, but we know it when we feel it. And so I wanted to write a book about that because, first of all, this book opens with that historical context that we talked about earlier, about really the history of trust in education. There's not a single person who applied to be a principal and got the master keys that said, I really want to break trust when I'm in this role. Everybody
Right.
wants to do that. And we all know, because we've read the books, we've attended the PD, we've listened to the podcast, we know what it's like to be trustworthy. We know we need to be honest, we need to communicate well, we need to have hard conversations. And I do a lot of work with principals on those areas. But there's another component I don't think we talk about enough, and that is being trust willing. Okay, what in the world does that mean? When I talk about trust willing, I mean, as a principal, we have to make sure we're not being overcritical, that we are not micromanaging, that we are not refusing to delegate because we don't think anyone will do it as well as we do. We need to accept that we have an entire school full of highly educated, motivated people who can do amazing things if we get out of their way. And there's another component to that too. And this I believe lies solely on the principal, and that is to build strong systems so that those people can succeed. When I was first training to be a principal, this was the phrase that was thrown around and I bought in, Darren. I loved it. It was hire good people and get out of their way. I was like, that's it. That's leadership. Well, I have since watched and seen phenomenal teachers and educators break under bad systems. Because if there is not something, and I'm going to be really generic here, but if there isn't a orderly, reasonable, common sense, consistent way that kids' attendance is taken, that they walk to assemblies, that parent-teacher conferences are organized, that board meetings are run. If those things feel chaotic and stressful every single time, you can have the best teacher in the galaxy, and that teacher's going to say, I can't do this anymore. I can't. Because they come to school and they don't think about how can I best teach a kid where to put a semicolon. They're thinking, oh my God, we have a fire drill. I hate fire drills. There's always a fight. And, it's probably going to rain. The lines were like, my point being, when there's chaos, when there's not systems, people break. And that is what makes them not be able to trust. And that's not just teachers, by the way, that's parents too. If I'm a parent and I'm like, I don't get consistent communication from the school, the grades are never uploaded, the pickup line is a disaster. Are they charging attendance for the band concert or not? If a parent's walking around with those questions, they're walking around frustrated, uninformed, and angry. And then that makes them not trust the school. So what I'm saying, let me summarize. We have to be trust willing. We have to recognize we have an entire bench of people who are phenomenal and doing great work. And then secondly, we have to have the systems in place that those phenomenal people can soar and bloom. And that's when trust is not just built, but sustained and maintained.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, listening to you talk right there kind of took me back to my first year and a half, maybe even 2 years as a building principal. And I took over from somebody who had been the building principal for 17 years. He had amazing systems in place.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I was only the third principal in 35 years in that building. And unfortunately, I fell into that trap of thinking I had to be the superhero and I had to do everything for everybody, right? So many of us fall into that trap.
We do.
And honestly, I undid a lot of really, really good systems. So I know you coach leaders, I coach leaders. Let's talk about systems just a little bit. Let's lean in and help our new administrators who are just jumping in and they're trying to think things through. Maybe let's kick around a few ways for them to evaluate the systems that are in place or to just discover what systems are in place. So I've got a couple thoughts in my head, but I'll let you go first. Let's just kind of volley them back and forth.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I would say is take off your cape. You don't need to be a superhero. When I first took over, there was
I wish somebody would have said that to me at the beginning.
Yeah, take off your cape. It will not only be less heavy, but you don't need it because when you take over a school, if you come in killing flies with the shotgun, you're just going to look like somebody who doesn't have restraint and discipline in yourself. And I also want to tell everyone who just got their first master key for a building, you're going to have people come to you and tell you what's wrong with the building. The loudest and first voices are not the voices you should listen to. They're a piece of it, but for heaven's sake, say, thank you so much for sharing. This is something I'll watch over the next year. And I slowed my speech there because not over the next day or week, but take time. I think about when I had just taken over in a building and a teacher came to me and she said, recess is a disaster. It's not safe. There are children who are going to get hurt. And I was like, okay, I need to figure, we need fencing. We need more people on duty. No, that wasn't it at all. This particular teacher had had a problem the year before and had gotten disciplined for her lack of oversight on the playground. Had I believed her, I would have blown up an entire system that, to your point, had worked very well for 2 decades. So slow your roll. Take off your cape and watch and look and listen. And if you're coming, especially if you're coming from another school, and let's say you go out to, here's a great example. You go out to bus dismissal the first day and it's chaos. There's kids everywhere. And you're like, in my previous school, this was nailed down. I'm changing everything. We're changing all of it. And you change it. The reason it was chaos is because it's the first day of school or the first week of school and no kid knows where they're going. Give it till November, December. Then maybe think, I'm going to change this for next year. Don't take chaos as an indication of where things always are, especially at the beginning of the year. Because what worked in your previous school where the entrance and exit and the cars and the walkers and the pit, all of that was different, will literally not work here because the factors are different. So take off the cape and slow down. Darren, what do you have?
Man, that's so good. So I want to kind of build on one you just talked about. So I remember one of the first things I made change on, but it didn't happen right away, was our evacuation system. So large building, 350,000 square feet, 44 different exit doors. I mean, just yikes, right? I mean, like, good luck with single point of entry on this thing, right? When we would do evacuation drills, specifically, I mean, we called them fire drills. Number one, we changed the term to, no, this is an evacuation drill. No matter the reason, it's evacuation. But we actually went to the development of some very specific zones and communication pieces to relay back, because the problem with our system, and it took me being in a different role, because I'd been an assistant principal in that building, but I didn't oversee emergency drills. I just did my role. I stood at door 35 and ran the stopwatch, right? I mean, that's what I did.
I had that job once, yes.
Well, now, yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. Breaker 19, my time was a minute 43 seconds, right? Yeah. And Mrs. Smith was
our last time by 4 seconds. We did it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what we discovered was there were other gaps in our system. Sure, we were worried about how fast we got them out, but in sitting and having conversations with teachers, with maintenance staff, with custodians, the number one thing we were missing was we weren't giving teachers time to actually take attendance, to find out who came with them. You know, hey, I got these 3 kids who were in the hallway. They'd been in the bathroom. I grabbed them, brought them with me. So the whole reunification thing, we had none of that in place. But I spent some time, I didn't do it after the first one. It was, so the most important thing simply was, you know, we have to make sure we're listening to those around us. So that would be, I guess, maybe the system or the step that I would talk about. Now I'll throw it back to you.
I think those systems, that's exactly what I was referring to when I said you have to have strong systems so that good people can excel. And I also want to shift. We've talked a lot about operations. Let's talk a little bit about instructional leadership.
Absolutely.
When I think about teachers and parents too, and students, I think instructional leadership is a big part of that. And many principals kind of retreat into the operation side because that's it's easily understandable, right? Did I do all my fire drills? Check. Is the heat on? Check. Is the, did the buses come? Check. Instructional leadership is tricky. And I've been working with a lot of principals on this because a lot of us are walking around with a dirty, dark secret, which is we don't feel strong as instructional leaders because we probably know one content area very, very well. It was the one we taught. And in a lot of other content areas, we feel a little bit like we're bluffing. I was an English teacher, give me English teachers all day long, but you put me in an AP chemistry class, oh my gosh, or an orchestra class, Spanish class, whatever. So here's where we have to be trust willing and trustworthy at the same time when doing instructional leadership. We have to go into a classroom and say to the teacher, this is what I saw that I really, really liked. Tell me what you're doing that you liked. Teach me about your content. While we're having our post observation, can you pull up your standards and kind of just tell me some examples of how you might address those standards? So be curious, be inquisitive. Many principals think they have to go in being judgmental. I don't know about you, Darren. Whenever anybody's judging me, my rankles go up right away. I feel defensive. I feel annoyed. I'm thinking about qualifications. Are you qualified to judge me? So we have to be willing to trust that the teachers that are teaching do care about kids, that they woke up this morning wanting to do good in the world, and say to them, how do you do it? Tell me about that. And give yourself the grace of time, exactly like you did with the fire drill. Listen, learn, give time for teachers to show you where they're excelling and to ask you for help, for support. And now I want to be clear, there's a small percentage of teachers who probably need you to go in with a wrecking ball and guide them. But if it's not an area of expertise and strength for you as a leader, own that and say, I'm here to learn with you. This evaluation is absolutely evaluating your skill as a teacher, but I want to support you, not be punitive and make you feel really bad about yourself when we leave this room today. So build trust through those conversations.
Well, and I love that you went to my favorite phrase that I share with school leaders too when it comes to the instructional leadership. Be curious, not judgmental. I think so often as new school leaders. So again, those of you who just got the master key put in your hand, don't think you need to go in with, here's how I'm going to fix this teacher, because probably 90% of your teachers are doing some really, really amazing things. The best thing you can do is just ask them good questions. When you ask them good questions, you'll launch into these incredible conversations about pedagogy. They already know the answer. They don't need you to have the answer. But something I really love that you shared there too is sitting down with them, even in that post conversation, and saying, hey, tell me a little more about your standards, because I don't necessarily know. So AP Chem I'd have been fine with. I was a science guy, right? But English teacher, maybe not so much. Math teacher, maybe not so much. Right. So, certainly doing that, I think, is super, super important. And interesting little wrinkle here, by the way, we've talked about your dissertation. My topic actually was, where do leaders feel strongest? Organizational management or instructional leadership? And it was interesting what I found. So, but we're not here to talk about my dissertation, but there we go.
Well, maybe you can come on Principal Matters and tell me about that, because that's fascinating. Here's what I would say too. I want to go back to what you just said. You said, be curious, not judgmental. And you say, in your tone changed. I don't know if you caught that, but you said, tell me about these standards, because I'm not really sure about them. That is an awesome way to do it. If you had said, okay, next I'm going to need you to pull up the standards and show me which one you covered today. The tone with which we asked that question, your tone was curious. It was, teach me, help me, because I want to learn in this conversation, as opposed to, I'm trying to catch you. I'm trying to catch you not doing something right. Yeah. So the way with which we arrange our words, the tone of our voice, will show whether we're being judgmental or curious. And so I think you modeled it well for our listeners here, because it has to be curious. It can't be like a gotcha kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and I think that's something that is such a difficult piece. I had Craig Randall on here not too long ago on the podcast. And of course, we talked about trust-based observations and same kind of concept with, we've got to build that emotional safety for our staff. We've got to be able to allow them to feel like this is a safe space. And I'm not working for a leader who is all about compliance, more so than I'm working with somebody who's all about, teaching and learning. I love that you shifted us to the instructional leadership piece, because it is, after all, why we do what we do. It's about teaching and learning. So give us another nugget on instructional leadership. What is something that, tying it into the trust piece or not, something that you're really kind of pushing with the leaders that you support?
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of, I'm going to try and process this thought in my mind quickly. There's a lot of teachers out there doing really, really good work that aren't seen by their principals. And here's why. There tend to be the alpha teachers, right? They're on every committee. They are always in the principal's office, pointing out problems, pointing out celebrations. They're great. We love them. Those are awesome teachers. But there's also the quiet teachers that are doing phenomenal work, and they never get that, hey, you're amazing thing from their principal. So here's a time that this really hit home for me. I had taken over a new school, and there was a teacher, and I'm going to call her Beth. I totally made that up. And Beth was an older teacher who was, I got kind of some eye rolls from other people because she kind of kept to herself, and she was passionate about teaching reading and intervention. She was passionate about that, but she largely worked alone. And she was kind of ignored and overseen by many other people. Well, I went and watched her a couple times. I'm like, I think this might be the best reading teacher I've ever seen. She was focused. She used data. It was encouraging. Nobody ever saw her work. She would come to IEP meetings and intervention meetings, and she would be prepared. She would be eloquent. She would reassure parents. Like, I thought, this woman is a gem. Why isn't she, leading this place, right? And so I sat her down and I asked her that. And she said a couple things. First of all, she said, I think we have an ageism problem in education. For many teachers, once you get close to retirement, the things that people say to you is, when are you going to retire? They don't say, hey, do you have any tips on working with this kid you had last year? She said, I feel pushed out. She said, I feel like I have a huge amount of expertise, but I'm overlooked for that. And I said, well, great. I'll put you on all the committees. And she said, I don't want to be on committees. I'm not a leader. I'm a teacher. I am going to be doing amazing work here in room 137. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it well. And I was forever changed by Beth because Beth was a victim of ageism. They thought she should retire. She had more skill and training. I was like, you could teach a crocodile to read. You are so good. But we don't necessarily see those teachers. And so you know what I did? Every time I saw Beth from then on, I said, I see you, and I'm so glad you're here. And she later came to me when she did retire and say, you made me feel like the valued teacher I believe that I was. So my advice there to principals, and this really covers systems and instruction and trust and everything, is see those unsung heroes and let them know you see them and learn from them. And if they don't want to be leading the PD committee or the data team or whatever, let them be. But still they have expertise that's really making a difference with kids every single day.
Yeah, that's such an important piece because now probably more than ever, we have this really, really big gap from our youngest teachers to our most veteran teachers. Yes. And I had a conversation here on the show recently with Chris Culver where we were talking about, how do you work with different generations of teachers with so many different generations now currently residing inside of our schoolhouses. And that piece of advice right there, regardless if you are a 22-year-old teacher, right, if you're a 60-year-old teacher, being the leader that makes them feel seen, heard, valued, and trusted, that's what it's all about right there. And that's true leadership. I love that so much.
Right. Well, and then there might be the other teacher who she leads the Sunshine Committee. She's on the union board. She's everywhere. She's all over the place, but she may be spreading toxicity and negativity or whatever. And I'm not saying that that's true. I'm saying that everyone has things to give. And many times as principals, we lean on those alphas to let us know, as the barometer of our schools. But those alphas may not be your barometer at all. I always say to principals, ask subs how they feel when they come in your building. That's your barometer. The people that aren't there, that aren't having the vested interest. If your subs say, I love it here. This is the only building I'll work. I walk down the hall and people say hi to me. They invite me to lunch. That's a different answer than, well, I don't really know anybody's names. No one would unlock the door. Where's the copy machine? That tells you that you might have some culture work to do. But don't use those loud voices to give you a false positive about how your school is going.
Okay, so one last thing I want to get to before I ask you the last question I ask everybody here on the show.
Okay.
Another, something you just said sparked a thought in my head, something I've heard you say. I don't remember if I've heard you say this on Principal Matters or where I've heard you say this, but again, we're leaning into those early career leaders, and they're going to have those people who are going to love them and champion them no matter what.
Yep.
They're going to have people who you are the worst person ever, no matter
Right.
what. And then
Right.
the chunk in the middle, right? Your
Right.
25, 50, 25 is what I've heard you
Yes.
talk
Yes.
about. So
Well
I want
done,
to
Darren. I
tee
do
that
talk
up
about
for
that.
you. And I want you to talk about that for those leaders so they don't
Right.
get stuck on that
Yes.
negative 25. So go ahead.
Yep. So this is something I want to be clear. This is Jen's rough math from whatever 27 years of doing this. I think 25% of the people are going to love you as a leader because you're the boss and you've got the business cards that say so. 25% are going to think you're lousy. Everything you do is stupid. This is so dumb because you're the boss. They don't want to hear it from you. They'll grudgingly follow along what you say, but they're going to complain about it. And then there's 50% in the middle that are going to kind of waver. They like this decision. They don't like that decision. They generally think, okay, you're the boss. Well, it's fine. Those are the ones I think that it's important to focus in on and make sure that they are you're listening to them, you're hearing their feedback. And that's not to erase the 25 on either end, but there are some people who, no matter, again, what you do, you are amazing. And then there's those toxic teachers that just stir the pot and cause trouble no matter what. I always, a lot of people call me, help me through this one teacher who seems to want to get me fired no matter what I do. It's negative, gossip, clicky, blah, blah, blah. I always say lead around those people, lead around them. They cannot be changed. They cannot be fixed. Focus on the teachers, the staff, the parents, the students who are moving your school forward. Though that the 25 in the front and the 50 in the middle, though that's your group to focus on. So I think, again, many times principals measure their leadership success on one or two loud, negative, nasty voices, and they feel like they're failures. And I think that's like looking into a mirror in the dark. You can't really see who you are. You have to turn on the lights and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, no, that's outstanding advice. I really, really appreciate that. And definitely new leaders, don't allow yourself to gauge who you are based on those folks. I will add on, I'll say yes and with what Jen just said. Yes to all of that. And those 4 or 5, I had 5, no joke. I had 5. I can name them for you if you'd like, because I refuse to protect the guilty any longer. But I just went and spent time with them, and I didn't like, always give them what they wanted. I made sure I told them, hey, I want to make sure you feel heard, but being heard and getting your way are not always the same thing. Make sure you know that. And that helped, but you're right. Lead around the most toxic and just don't waste your time there. It's, you want to make sure you're really moving everybody else forward. So, okay. Man, our time has just flown by.
I know.
Which is
and
not
now
a
I'm so
surprise.
curious.
Yeah.
What is the question you're going to end with?
Oh,
is this something you ask everyone, really?
This is a question I ask everybody here on the show. This is the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. So, Jen, tell me how you're leaning into leadership right now.
I'm leaning in by staying relentlessly committed to positive leadership. I do not mean toxic positivity. Anyone who wants to accuse me of that. I mean, I'm choosing to wake up every day and saying, dagnabbit, we are doing great work. These buses are picking up the kids. They're bringing to us. We're doing our best. We're getting them home safe. That is what I'm focused on. In my district, we talk a lot about our 20 square feet, and that's really what we can control and where we can make a difference. So, am I calling my legislators? Absolutely. Am I advocating for public education? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, the team that I'm leading, the principals with whom I work, when I get to go out and work with districts, do a keynote or whatever, I'm trying to bring my deep-rooted belief that we are doing great work. our children are better because we are in their lives, not our biological children, the children we teach, whether they're 3 or 18 or 22. We are making their lives better, their futures better, their days better. And I'm embracing that with all my guts, blood, and bones, man. We have to. I refuse to pout. I refuse to bemoan. I refuse to complain, because that ain't going to do anybody any good. There's enough people doing that. So relentlessly positive, my friend. That's it.
I love it. That's outstanding. All right. So Jen, if people aren't already following you, if they're not listening to Principal Matters, that kind of stuff, they're going to want to get connected with you. What's the best way for people to follow Dr. Jen Schwanke?
Yep, they can find me. My website is jenschwanke.com, and there's a little form there. If they want to fill it out, it'll shoot me an email. And they can follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Easy to find, unfortunately. I'm out there. So thank you. Thank you for having me too, Darren. This was so fun. I feel like we need about 18 more hours.
Yeah, no kidding. We'll definitely have to do another one here very, very soon. So yeah, thanks so much for joining me here on the show.
Thank you so much.
All right. Fantastic conversation there with Dr. Jen Schwanke. Again, I appreciate her coming on the show. Make sure, folks, you check out her newest book, Trusted, Trust Pillars, Trust Killers, and The Secret to Successful Schools, which was just released. There is a link down in the show notes to check that out. And now it is time for a pep talk. This week on the pep talk, I want to talk about ways that you can protect your most valuable resource, and that's your time. In fact, I want to give you 5 quick tips that you can use to take care of and protect that time. Here we go. Number 1, I want you to just start with some clarity. Really identify what are the top 3 priorities for you as you go through this particular season of life, this particular season of your school year, whatever it is maybe that you're leading. What are the things that only you can do versus the things that other people could take on that you could delegate? Number 2, plan your week before it gets started. Set aside time on a Sunday evening or a Saturday afternoon or even Friday before you leave the office and just lay it out. What is my week going to be? Use your calendar, fill it with your values and your commitments, and not just allow it to be controlled by the demands that land in your inbox. Number 3, guard your classroom time and your hallway time. Be really intentional to schedule time to be in classrooms and the hallways, just like you would schedule a time for a meeting, and then really protect it. Your presence really matters. So be very intentional about focusing on having that time set aside and then stick to it. Number 4 is just delegate as much as you possibly can. Just be relentless about this. Not everything needs you to be directly involved. I know that's hard sometimes, but leaders, you don't have to be directly involved in everything. Empower your leadership team, empower your staff to take ownership of the things that they can. Delegating isn't about losing control. It's about building and empowering capacity in the people around you. And then number 5, just make sure you build in time for reflection and time to reset. Even if you just take 5 minutes on your drive home, or maybe you walk to work and you just take that time on the walk as you go back home and just think about, okay, what went well today and what might be some things I need to adjust in terms of how I took care of my priorities. If you do that, if you really spend a little bit of time, and then maybe at the end of the week, take a step back and say, okay, how did my time this week align with my priorities? Man, what a difference that's going to make for you as a leader. So there you go, folks. Those are 5 very quick tips you can use to take control of your time and to really make sure that you are guarding it and protecting it like it is truly the highly valuable resource that it genuinely is. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. Get out there, have a Road to Awesome week.